going to dive right in. So today's goal is that you leave with a few small tools and techniques that you can use in your classroom starting next week. I've been in a lot of professional development in my life, and about 80 to 90% of it, completely useless. So if you get 30 seconds of useful material that you can actually put into action in the classroom, I'll consider that a victory. If you don't get that and you at least laugh and smile a little bit over the next hour, it's better than most of the PDs that I've been to. So I hope that we have a good time together, and I hope you get some useful stuff. Hold the questions in your head. I'm happy to answer them. We only have a really short break in between this and the next session, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to do a Q&A at the end. I'm going to ask if you have a really pressing question that is directly relevant to what I'm saying, ask it, but otherwise try to hold it and just pop me an email after, or try to grab me in between sessions. We don't have as much time as I would like for this session. We're going to do a lot of interactive stuff. We'll be using our bodies. We'll be warming up fully. We'll be showing some exercises there. I have recordings of pretty much everything I'm going to show you, either on my YouTube channel or on SoundCloud with MP3s there. So you'll get digital links to all of that. It's also in the back of your handout packet there. And your admin are going to send me a full list of all your emails. So you don't need to give me your email. I'll have it, and I'll send you everything digitally when you're done, including a video of this exact performance. So we're going to start by moving our bodies a little bit and getting our voices going. So set whatever you got on the floor or on the chair and stand up. And stretch up high, touch the sky, bouncing tiptoes. Touch the sky, don't touch this guy. And stretch down low, touch your toes. My last church choir director used to say, if God wanted us to touch our toes, he would have put them on our knees. Come up nice and slow, roll those shoulders. Good, free up the neck. If you don't steal any of my warm-ups, you're welcome to steal my dad jokes. And roll those shoulders back nice and good. When you roll your shoulders back, you get that nice open Superman posture. I'm going to ask a few of you to just step forward a little bit, just to space out. Yeah, thank you. There you go. A few step forward, that'll give you enough space to use your bodies. Perfect. When you roll your shoulders back, you get that nice elevated Superman posture. That's what we want for singing. When you roll your shoulders forward, you get that hunched over grandma posture. And I love my grandma, but she's not a good singer. So I don't know if Superman's a good singer. I assume, because he's pretty good at everything else, that he's good. So I say Superman posture. That's not slacker posture. It's not soldier posture. It's nice and tall and elevated without that effort going into holding it in place. So go ahead and go to that soldier posture, lock everything up, stand up tall, good posture, stand up straight. Those sorts of things tend to make your kids a little tight and a little tense. They're trying to show you how good their posture can be. We want to relax that, elevate it, keep it loose. You probably heard the string from the top of the head, the string from here. The analogy that I like a lot is a bobblehead. So I don't want you actually bobbling your head, but if you think of a bobblehead when it's not moving, it's totally balanced, it's still, but if you touch it just a little bit, it can move around quite a lot. So I don't want you to feel like if I came up and touched your head, that it would be hard to move it, and it would move with your body. I want it to be nice and loose, so it can flop around. So go ahead and move your neck around a little bit. And chin down to the chest. Rest your hands on the back of the head. The more you can free up tension from the instrument, the throat, the jaw, the tongue, any of this, the more free and easy and relaxed that voice is going to be. Take your hand and show me your palm. Put it flat on your throat and swallow. Feel that bump that moves up and down? It's your Adam's apple or your Eve's pomegranate or whatever you want to call it. Steal liberally. They're not all my jokes. Most of them are, but the bad ones are mine. Adam's apple, Eve's pomegranate, vocal cords, vocal folds, larynx, whatever you want to end up calling it, that's the place where your voice comes from. You can drop your hand now. Thank you very much. Tell them not to squeeze if you have them do that, because some will just grab the throat. That's not as healthy. So that's where your voice comes from, that little bump right there. The vocal folds are about the size of your thumbnails. We do like to call them vocal folds, not vocal cords, because they are big flaps of meaty muscle, not long strings, like on a violin. You got two of them, they flap together, and that's what produces the sound whenever you make any sounds. Shouting, whispering, screaming, crying, calling, singing, any of that comes from those little teeny thumbnail-sized right in there. And that larynx can move up and down through your throat. When it moves up, you get that closed off kind of sound. When it moves down to a neutral place, you get your normal speaking voice. When it moves down a little bit lower, you get that darker, richer, fuller sound. You don't need to physically manipulate that at all. If you just relax and free up and create the image of the large sound inside your head, maybe with a little James Earl Jones, a little Darth Vader, there's some models you can imagine, then you get that space very naturally. You don't have to consciously control that, but you as educators knowing how this works is a little bit more helpful. You don't necessarily need to explain it to your kids, but it can be cool to have them do that little swallow thing and feel, oh yeah, this little bump, that's what it is, especially for your boys changing voices. They can notice the growth in there. And if they're going to turn into basses, they'll have nice, big, prominent a larynx. If they're going to be tenors, it won't be as dramatic. The larger the instrument, the lower the pitch, as you know from your band work. So the lowest notes you sing are actually the most difficult in some ways, as much as high notes are hard. I'm not gonna lie and say high notes aren't hard, but the lowest notes require the full relaxation and freedom, the full length of the vocal folds. If there's any tension anywhere, they're gonna shrink up a little bit and you're gonna lose access to that full open string kind of feeling to get that lowest tone. So the lowest notes especially need to be completely free of tension. We talk a lot about freeing the high notes from tension, but there's gonna be some residual tightness there when you go up to your high notes, because what happens when you sing a high note is instead of your open string, full length of your vocal folds, they zip up, and only part of them vibrates. And the higher you go, the less of them vibrates. So there is, by definition, more tension in the instrument when you go higher. But you don't want that to creep out through the rest of the instrument. You want that to be as free and relaxed as possible. Roll those shoulders again for me a little bit. And can you just wiggle your fingers a little bit, nice and loosely? Very good, very good. Can you tighten up your shoulders, tighten up your arms, and then wiggle your fingers? And notice that they're a little bit more robotic, a little bit more rigid, right? Try to loosen up those fingers, but try to keep your shoulders tight. It's hard, isn't it? There's a thing called sympathetic activation in your muscles, which means when one muscle is tight, the muscles near it get tight as well. If you're doing a bench press at the gym, if you tighten your fists, you can actually lift more weight. Even though your fists are not carrying any of that weight from the bar, that sympathetic activation in the forearms, in the biceps, in the chest carries through, and you get a little bit more out of each lift. That works in reverse for singing. If you have any tension anywhere along the chain in the instrument, even all the way down to the legs and the feet, it's gonna creep up. It's not gonna be as bad if it's the throat and the jaw and the face. That's gonna be the worst. But even anywhere else in the body, it's gonna creep its way up into your instrument. The more restricted, the more you lose those low notes, the more you lose the freedom in the high notes, and the more closed off your sound is because your larynx pulls up nice and tight. The larynx is attached at one end to your tongue. Your tongue is the only muscle in the body that is only attached at one end. Every other muscle is attached to two ends. So you got the loose end up here, other end goes all the way back to the larynx. Any tightness in that tongue pulls up the larynx, and then you get that closed off sound that you don't like in your young boys. The more freedom there, the more beautiful the tone, and the easier it is to access those higher notes. So part of that comes from the tongue tension thing. There's some exercises you can do for that. You can do just lip trills, tongue trills. If you can do a tongue trill, go ahead and try that with me. If you can do a lip trill, go ahead and try that with me. If you can do a tongue and a lip trill at the same time, go ahead and try that. It's a hard, yeah, no, it's a hard one. There was a scientist from the Mayo Clinic who presented at Arizona ACDA, and she showed me that, and I was like, I never even thought to try that, and I wouldn't think I could do it, but once you do it, you're like, oh neat. And it really requires a lot of freedom in the instrument. You can't do that if you're tightening stuff up. So if you can get your kids to try that sort of thing, they won't all succeed, but it'll help them free that up a bit, moving in that direction. If you can't lip trill, it's often because of a tight face. So everybody put a big smile on your face and try to do a lip buzz. Hard, right? So hands on the cheeks, tug them down a little bit, close your eyes so you don't look at the goofy music teacher up front who always makes you laugh and smile. I imagine many of you are that person too. Relax those cheeks and give me a big, no pitch, just a motorboat. Good, and then add some pitch. And then move that pitch. Beautiful, thank you so much. Thank you so much, wonderful, wonderful. You don't need the big old floppy horse slurs like mine. But the more, thank you, the more relaxed you can have the instrument, the better it is. So you're not looking for that trumpet buzz. You're not looking for, that is not the key. So if you're working with kids, or if you yourself study winds, brass, embouchure is a very difficult thing to overcome to get some freedom in the instrument. Most everything else you learn is directly applicable. The breathing technique, the phrasing, the musicality, the sight reading, the intonation, all those sorts of things are great. The embouchure gets in the way. So that's the thing you need to learn to turn off. Yes?
Are these vocal, or are these like muscular exercises, or both?
Could be both. Could be both. I would say the relaxation and freedom thing is a thing you wouldn't want to work as directly with the wind and the brass, because it might interfere with what the work they're doing on developing their embouchure. That's the only thing I would caution about, but you could use both and just kind of explain to them the range of what they're doing there. If they're also singing, then they should be able to turn off that tension. So yes, but mostly this is to free up the muscles up here so that the voice can be more expressive. However, when you're playing, any tension in your body is also going to manifest itself in your playing. You won't be able to play as lyrically and flowingly and beautifully, even if you're a string player. You won't be able to play as beautifully if you're tightening up any part of your body. And you should be breathing in the phrase. You should be moving with the music, even if you don't need to breathe to produce your sound. If you're a percussionist, if you're a pianist, if you're a string player, then you should still be breathing in with the motion and encouraging your kids to do the same. I assistant conducted the orchestra when I was an undergrad as a voice major, and I asked my professor, I said, you know, do I need to breathe with all my cues when I'm conducting an orchestra? Because I have to with the choir, because if I don't breathe with them, they don't breathe well. And he said, well, you only need to breathe with your instrumentalists who need to breathe to play. So, oh, okay, so like the winds and the brass. I wonder how good the Mozart symphony would sound if your violins did not breathe for the entire song. Good point. So if you're going to breathe anyway, you should breathe in the phrase. You should move in the phrase. If you're going to be producing music, you should do it with as much freedom and relaxation as you can. You should feel like you can just get up and start dancing and moving and have a lot of freedom in the body, even if you have them standing in a traditional choir format and not moving their hands and not moving their bodies and just stand and deliver. They still should have that freedom that if they wanted to move, they could. Thank you. Alrighty, we're going to do a couple of voice exercises. I'm sure you're familiar with sighs and sirens, but let's just get the voice moving. Oh. And ideally, on all of those sighs and sirens, you want to make sure they don't get stuck in your head voice and not move all the way down to the low range. Even with adults, it's very common to have There's a lot of notes left that you're not hitting when you do that. The sirens, the ones that go down, up, and then down, much more common to have them just kind of die off midway through, because it takes more breath to do the full, long, extended exercise. We're going to spend a lot of time working on that bridge between head voice, chest voice today, because that's the main thing that you really want in working with the voice changing voices. We'll also talk a little bit about helping those who struggle to match pitch at all, the intonation ear training element. That's not so much a specific issue to voice changing voices, it's more of an issue that's broadly applicable to any singer that just doesn't have good ear training. And that could be an adult, it could be a young child, it could be someone going through transition. The transition issues can affect their intonation, but it's mostly a mechanical instrument problem. If they were singing in tune and then their voice started to change and now they're not singing in tune, they don't have an ear problem. They have a throat problem. So a big part of that is getting your brain to connect to your vocal folds and be able to use the new instrument. Some of these boys go to sleep with a violin and they wake up with a cello. And the fingering's a little different. So the instrument's larger, you gotta re-coordinate it, the notes don't come out the same way anymore. The faster that change happens, the more dramatically they're growing, the more dramatically the cracks come in, the more difficult it's gonna be, but the shorter it tends to be. Also, the lower they tend to end up. The lowest basses tend to have a pretty quick change, and it tends to be very dramatic. They tend to lose a lot of function in the middle range, but it tends to be over moderately quickly. The higher tenors take a little bit longer. It can take over a few years, but it might not be as dramatic. My voice change took several years, and I never really had bad cracks, but I'd been singing since childhood and had pretty decent training, so that probably factored in, but also the length of the change, I think, was a big factor as well. So when you see those really bad, dramatic problems in the boys' voices, it's sometimes a really good thing, and I tell them, like, hey, this is awesome, because the worse this is right now, the sooner it'll be over. Like Billy over there, whose voice doesn't have those problems that yours does, he's going to be dealing with this stuff for 2 more years. You're going to be dealing with it for 2 more months. So suck it up, buttercup, and deal with it.
That's all you're
Yeah, I wouldn't say that if I was teaching in a public school, but thank you. Larynx function is the connection from the brain to the chords is the main thing that you need to help them with. They just need to sing a bunch. They need to keep singing through those awkward, uncomfortable, fuzzy, weird, crackly, bad places in their voices in order to get a better control of that new instrument. They do not have that instrument before. A young voice, a young girl's voice is different than a transitioning voice, which is different than a fully mature voice. I won't directly address the girls as much in this session, but I'll tell you the one thing that is most relevant on the girls' voice change. First of all, they do have a voice change. It is not as dramatic, but it is a voice change. The thing that you should pay attention to is that breathiness is normal in adolescent girls. As they're going through their puberty change, breathiness is normal. Not all of them will be breathy, but you don't need to get the breathiness out of their tone. It's not a technical thing, it's a physiological thing. Most women, as they go through their voice change, develop a thing called the whisper triangle. So these are your vocal folds. When they buzz together, they're completely closed. That's called full closure. All of my air is pitch. Some of my air isn't pitch, that's not full closure, that's partial closure. This is full closure, you don't hear that breath in the sound. A lot of girls, as they start going through their change, this little bit at the top of the chords just doesn't close all the way. It starts to grow before the muscular strength is there to zip it up fully. So you get this little bit of air escaping at the top, and you get the young girls who sing, let it go, can't hold it back. That sound, whisper triangle. You can help them get a little bit over that. I have some exercises that'll help them develop that chest voice a bit more, get a bit more ring. But if you can't get the breathiness out of there, don't force them to tighten up to get rid of the breathiness. Because that's the only way they can stop it when it's an actual physiological issue. They can tighten up the throat and give you, let it go, and there's no breath in the sound, but it's also a terrible sound. And you're also risking damaging their voices. I've seen more and more 12, 13, 14-year-olds with full-on vocal nodes needing surgery and months of vocal rest nowadays, particularly from the musical theater world. So that is, feel free to come on in. Hi, everything okay?
It's just peeking.
Oh yeah, feel free to hang out in the back and step out whenever you need to. Thank you so much. So don't worry if your girls are breathy. Totally normal, totally okay, just accept that. In fact, I often, when I'm working with girls in that age range, I will disclose that to the audience. I'll turn to them and say, hey, a lot of these girls are going through their voice change right now. You may be familiar with the boys' voice change. You may not know that girls have a voice change too. And I'll show them the exact same thing I just showed them. I'll model it for them and say, yeah, you're gonna hear a lot of air in the sound tonight. And that's because a healthy adolescent girl's voice is gonna sound that way. And that's okay. So we're gonna work through that, and by the time they get to high school, they're gonna have this beautiful ringing tone. It's gonna be so free and relaxed. It's gonna be wonderful. So don't worry about that. And you can kind of just show that off as a little bit of knowledge, help the parents understand a bit more. Now the parents can ask their kids about that too, and then, because often we tell our kids how to have healthy, beautiful, wonderful voices, and then they go back from the concert, and in the car, mom says, I couldn't hear you. Can you sing louder? I didn't. My mom, after every concert in middle school, high school, said, you did such a good job. I could hear you the whole time. It's not the point of choir. You shouldn't be able to hear me the whole time. That means I'm doing a terrible job. Thanks though, appreciate it. So sort of like I've been weightlifting for about 10 years, and so I went and like had a very good max deadlift, like 380 pounds. I come home and my roommate's girlfriend goes, Topher, you're looking really small. I get what you mean is I'm losing weight, like I appreciate that, but also I've been lifting weights for a very long time trying to get big, so maybe don't call me small. So yes, so your parents are often not intentionally, but counteracting what you're teaching in the classroom. They're telling them to sing louder, they're telling them to belt harder, they're hearing, Idina Menzel, Let It Go, Frozen, Wicked, all this stuff. They're seeing America's Got Talent, they're seeing American Idol, they're saying, why don't you sound more like that? You need to sound a little bit louder. Even if the parents have zero experience, they often are telling them that. And they're closer to their parents, most often, than they are to us. Some of our students are closer to us than their parents, but many of them are going to trust the parents' judgment over yours. And so you can tell them that all day long, but objectively, let it go, sounds more like the radio than let it go, even though that's a healthier sound for them. So it's a difficult thing, but if you explain what they're going through, that can help them through that transition. Question?
Okay, yes. Pretty new to this, and so if you do, like, so I'm using my Glee Club as the example, and I got a small little group, and we're going to be singing out for people.
Yeah.
But to tell them to turn up their voice a little bit and to project, like, I don't want to hurt anybody's voice.
Exactly, of course.
Here,
That is what we're just about to get into. Good point. Is the difference between volume and projection. So we often associate those, and we think louder singing is more projecting singing. We say project your voice to the back of the hall, and what we mean is speak loud enough so they can hear you in the back of the hall. Often in our theater coaching, that's what we mean. We don't teach them how to physiologically change the projection of your voice without changing the volume. So I'm going to show you some of that right now, and we'll do a couple exercises. That's in my routine, but we can skip right into that because that's relevant now. So right now I'm speaking with my full normal speaking projection. I have a relatively loud voice. I speak a little bit louder than most, but it's mostly projection. It's not mostly volume. If I turn off my ring, my resonance, my projection, and keep the same volume, my voice sounds like this. It's the exact same volume. I have not gotten any quieter. I have just turned off all of my projection mechanisms, so there's no carry to my voice anymore. It's now stuck right to the back of my throat, in the back of my head. Everything is relaxed. As I start to bring it a little bit more forward, I can get into this neutral place in the middle where most people talk normally, and then I can bring it a little bit more further forward and bring it up here into the front of the mask, and now you can hear me down the hall very easily. I'm not speaking any louder. I'm speaking the exact same volume, but I've moved my voice from here to here to here. And now you can hear me at the back of the hall. It's the difference between the shouting voice and the calling voice. So if you remember back when we were kids, they used to kind of still do this for most of us. Mom would say, come back home when the streetlights turn on, So you lean out on the porch and go, time for dinner! That's calling voice. Time for dinner! That's screaming, shouting voice. We don't want screaming, shouting. We don't want loud. We want carry. We want projection. We want ring. We want resonance. There's a lot of words. You use what word feels good for you, and you use a lot of words with your kids so they find the one that sticks for them. They might think buzz, they might think ring, they might think any of those words, but what they're thinking when they turn on that singing voice, that projection voice, is going to make a big difference. Let's try that. So everybody repeat after me. Hey, you over there.
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 That's the calling voice. That's the start of the projection, is to find that call. Don't find a shout, find a call. The next step is bringing that ring and resonance up here into the front of the instrument. So I'm going to show you a quick vocalize that can help you a lot with that. Take 2 fingers on each hand, press them into your cheekbones. Right, nice and hard, you should feel the bone in your fingers, and go sing.
Sing.
Yeah, it's called an open mouth hum, that NG sound. When the back of your tongue closes off your throat, all the air is forced up into the sinuses, which forces you to get a nice buzzy, ringy sound. You may have noticed if you've ever been in a choir or taken voice lessons that many of the exercises start with an M or start with an N, because that forces the air up into the sinuses and forces your ring and projection. You can't sing a hooty, non-projecting sound while singing an M, N, or NG. The NG is my favorite though for it. So one more time, sing.
Sing.
I love that you guys just find a pitch in unison no matter what I do. It's really cool. Right? It's a very neat thing. Thank you. So what you want to find is that buzz in your fingertips. Hold it as long as you need to feel a little bit of tingle in your fingertips. Sing.
Sing. Sing.
You find it? Yeah? It's funny, even when I move my pitch, you guys just stay right there. You have good ears. It's nice. Beautiful. So that buzz is what we want to maintain even in the vowel. It's going to be a lot less as soon as you go to the vowel. It's going to be much harder to feel. It might disappear. That's okay. Just trust that feeling and focus on that feeling. Even if you can't feel the buzz when you switch to the vowel, that's okay. But focus the sound there. So keep those fingers right there. We're going to do sing. So you hold that NG open to an E on the same pitch, and then go down your 5-note scale. Try to keep that buzz and ring in there the whole time. If it gets really nasal and closed off, that's okay. The point of this is to get your voice in the front of your instrument. The point of this is not a tall, soft, wonderful, beautiful classical tone. If you can maintain that space, sing. If you can keep that space with that ring, that's lovely. But if you can't, and many of our kids can't, they can't think of 2 things at once. They can barely think of 1 thing at once. So if you can ask them to just focus on that ring and buzz, if it gets super nasal and gross, then that's okay. Sing me. Sing me. Sing me. Sing A. Sing A. Sing A. Sing A. Sing A. Thank you. That's my favorite one for that. So try to maintain those feelings. Get them to do that. That's a great cue as well during the songs. As you're conducting, I try to make sure that most of my warm-ups have some physical element, and then I can tie that into my conducting. So if I'm conducting and they're singing, let's say, Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I can use this cue now, and they've done it almost every day in rehearsals. They know what that means. Bring your voice forward. And it might make it a little nasal, so then I might need to do a different gesture to open up the tone a little bit, but I have a large body of those sounds that I can use, those gestures that I can use to manipulate the sound in actual performance. Because you can't shout at the choir when you're performing. We get used to that. We start saying, taller, taller, more ring, come out, come out. But if they get used to that, they're expecting it in performance. So if they get used to trusting your gesture, there's a lot of freedom in what you can do. I also do sessions on conducting technique and non-traditional gesture work in order to shape the sound. I have some leftover handouts from that if you would like one when you go. But that stuff is very, very valuable. If you have these little cues, I'm sure you use some already. Intonation. Yeah. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of that. If you integrate it into your warm-ups, into integrate the same gesture every time. They know what it means. And you can give that to them. And you can prep them before a song with it. That's one of my favorite things. I bring up a choir and eye contact, great. Nice. Didn't need to say anything, did I? Great. Amazing grace. Center the breath. Free up the tone, nice and large. Relax up here. Focus the ring. There's little cues that your choirs can get used to, that your singers can get used to. That'll help them in performance. You tie it into the warm-ups, it makes a huge difference. Let's do another quick resonance one there, just to help you with that ring. Just give me your most beautiful, healthy ah. Ah. Lovely. Half that volume. Good. No scoops in the beginning. Ah. Find the pitch in your head before you sing. Better. Thank you very much. Give me your floatiest, hootiest, no ring head voice. Good. Give me your normal tone. Good. Give me your ringiest, buzziest. Interesting, interesting. Very, very nasal. I like that. Turn off the nasality and just give me a ring and forward placement. Thank you very much. We're going to move from the floaty into the ringy, okay? So it sounds like this. One big breath together. Use your hands with me, please. And that's a gesture I can use in my choirs in the middle of a phrase too. If I'm not getting enough floaty head voice, float the sound to the back of the head, and they know what that means. If I'm not getting enough ring and projection, bring the sound forward, they know what that means. Bring out the ring, they know what that means. Bite into the apple. This is my favorite for the vowel shapes that I like. I don't like the big, tall, oval classical vowels. Amazing grace, how sweet. Don't like the horizontal vowels. Amazing grace, how sweet. So you want that ring and that brightness in the front, that horizontal in the front, that space in the back. The dropped larynx, the tall, soft palate, that open space in the back, without that big, open, tall space in the front. You want it wide and tall, so I give triangle shape. My coach in college used to say, bite into the apple, that Italian ah. So grab an apple, bite in, that's the shape. And from there, you can warm it up depending on the song. If it's a classical song, you might want to warm it up, lift it up a bit more, get it a little bit taller tone. If it's musical theater, if it's country, you might go a little bit wider, a little bit more closed. But that's a good default sound for a nice buzz, a nice ring, a nice carry through. Now, tying that into our head voice, chest voice work, I want to give you a couple other little warm-up exercises we can do. I appreciate your patience and your willingness to stay standing this whole time. That is lovely. Thank you very much. My first choir, I had them stand for all rehearsals because we taught in an auditorium, and so I could have brought in chairs and struck them after every rehearsal, but it wasn't worth the effort. So we just, the first couple weeks, we just had stands, and they would stand with their binders. And I loved that because they didn't have to hold the binders, so you don't get that extra tension in the shoulders and the throat from doing that. And they got used to standing for an hour every single day. So then we got to the concert, there was none of that kind of shifting and uncomfortableness. They'd already built up the stamina. So I encourage you to practice with your students standing as much as you can for singing because they probably won't be performing while sitting down. Soccer teams don't often practice soccer while sitting down. Basketball teams don't often practice basketball while sitting down. Singing is a sport. It uses your whole body. You want to engage their bodies that way. So I want to give you a nice simple one right here. Descending 5-note minor scale. On a lu. Lu vowels are the easiest for floaty head voice. I'm going to take you down, and I want you to stay in your head voice the whole time. Don't shift into your lower shouty head voice. For those who are less familiar with this terminology, repeat after me, please. This is my head voice.
This is my head voice.
This is my singing voice.
This is my singing voice.
This is my chest voice.
This is my chest voice.
This is my speaking voice.
This is my speaking voice.
Now that's not universally true. You're going to use chest voice in performance. You want to teach them how to use their chest voice well, but if you get them to default to the head voice, you can tell them when to use chest voice in the right moment. Because if they default to chest, you're going to get that screechy, shouty high notes all the time in all your songs. So it also doesn't blend as well. The blend is much better if you can get everybody in that head. When you're dealing with the transitioning voices, bringing the head voice down is a key part to building the bridge, the break, that middle part of the voice. The middle part of the voice that goes is the transition between the thyroarytenoid and the cricothyroid, the muscles that are responsible for the chest voice and the head voice. There's two separate muscles inside your larynx that are responsible for the different functions of the voice. Ah is pretty much pure cricoarytenoid. The is pretty much pure thyroarytenoid. Cricothyroid, sorry, not cricoarytenoid. That's a third muscle. But anyway, you don't need to know the anatomy. You need to know that there's two separate muscles, one for head voice, one for chest voice. It's fuzzier than that when you actually get in the details of the anatomy, but that's enough for you to know, and it's enough for your kids to know. Two different muscles, they switch off. When you're in the middle, when you get that mix, they're trading off function. It's hard for them to both function at the same time, but they can trade off in a way that it's not really noticeable. So here's an example. Pure head. Pure chest. Mix, chest. That's what you want to develop. The mix requires the development of the middle to high chest, but also the development of the low head voice. Most of your singers, and probably most of you, unless you take an extensive voice lessons, will move up your chest, move up your chest, move up your chest, move up your chest into this middle zone until your chest sounds terrible, and then flip right over into your head voice. That is the most common thing you'll see from your singers. Right? So, you can't fix that. You can't fix that by fixing the chest voice. That muscle is already overtrained. The undertrained part, your high head voice is fine. All your high notes are always in head voice because they won't come out if you try to scream them in your chest voice. All your low notes are in chest voice because they won't come out if you try to sing them in your head voice. Much easier when you switch to your chest. The high chest takes care of itself because everyone belts along and sings to their musical theater songs and whatever kind of stuff they like on the radio, and everyone does high chest. Low head gets ignored. Low head is chronically ignored. If you do nothing else, just adding a little bit of warm up for the low head voice and forcing them to stay in their head voice when they don't want to will help to develop that mix. Because you need equal balance between the chest and the head, equal strength and equal ability to develop that mix. Most have way overdeveloped chest voices in the middle range, way underdeveloped head voices. You might see the opposite sometimes, particularly with young girls, particularly with some of the more flamboyant boys. You'll have the people who talk like this all the time and everything's in the head voice. Hello, Mrs. Smith, it's so nice to see you today. Those people might have highly developed head voices and have no chest at all. And those are the ones who, when they sing in their sighs and sirens, go, that's the lowest I can sing. I can't sing below the treble clef, I'm sorry. It's just too low for me. I don't have those notes. Just use your voice, come on. That's hard. That's a different problem. You know, but it's some percentage of our kids. 5%, 10%. They're in a little different bucket. They need the chest voice work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that in a group setting. Figure out who those kids are, pull them aside, bring them in at recess, bring them in at lunch, bring them in after school, do a little work with them on developing their chest a bit more. You should be developing the chest in your ensemble, but the amount of time you'll have to spend with them to get them into their chest is going to be detrimental for the rest of the students because they're already locked in their chest all the time. So if you spend an extra 20 minutes really developing their chest, it's just going to take away from the work you're doing on developing their head voice. So the default is the head. When you need to, bring them out to develop the chest. This exercise is my favorite one for that, like I said. I also like to include a little bit of minor work in my warm-ups because when you just do major warm-ups, minor keys always sound bad. So we're going to go up into our high floaty voices there. If you don't have a high G, just float it until you can get there. Just pretend, switch over to your falsetto, or just mouth it until we get to a range that you got. We're starting up high. So everybody give me a woo! Woo! Repeat after me. And we're going to keep going down and staying in our head voice. Don't let the chest get in there at all. Keep it in your head voice. If it gets breathy and disappears, that's okay. I just don't want to hear your chest. Everyone together. Down as low as you can go until they all pretty much disappear. You're developing that low head voice. That's what you need in order to get that mix. That's the main one I use. The other exercise I use once that low head is starting to sound okay is to do a scale in a variety of registers. So what I want you guys to do this time is a pure head voice. We're going to start, let's start a little bit lower. I know you guys didn't appreciate that key, so. We're going to go all the way down here in head voice and try to keep it head the whole time. going to stop in the middle. Take a breath. Come back in our chest. The goal is to balance the volume. That's very, very hard. Try not to make your chest voice dramatically louder than your head voice. It'll sound a little bit louder because it's more ringy, it's more projection. But try not to go, You're going to have to beat that out of your kids. So, all right, head voice, then chest. Breath. Thank you. Try it without the breath. The breath is the most helpful because when you breathe, you get a chance to switch over function from one muscle to the other instead of having to do it during phonation. When you switch over during phonation, that's how you get. That's the switch over you're hearing. When they take a breath there, they're doing that function and they're hiding the crack with that. You can actually use that as a technique in your choir repertoire or in your folk songs or whatever you're doing there to place a breath strategically if they're jumping between a low and a high note. Let them breathe in between there, a little quick one, just so they can reset their voice and not have those cracks show up. Ideally, you need to teach them to sing through that, but you're not going to get that in a single month, so if it's a week before the concert and it's still, weird cracks and wobbles in the middle of the performance, sneak in a couple extra breaths that let them reset that part of the voice. Try it without a breath this time. Head, 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 chest. Good. Try holding that middle note. Let's take a slightly lower key here. We're going to hold that middle note and do the transition exercise we did. So put your hand back there. Listen first. Thank you. Try that with me. So we're stretching it out on one note in the middle of the range, and then you go right to doing it without any of those transitions and trying to smooth over the middle note. So I don't want to hear this time head, chest, break. I want to hear a nice smooth shift so that the first note is pure head, the bottom note is pure chest, and in between 90-10, 80-20, 60-40, 50-50, 70-30, shift from one to the other, like this. Pure head voice. Pure chest voice. Try that with me, show me your hands. One is your head, one is your chest. It doesn't matter which one it is, but you can pick one if you want. Head voice first. Oh, sorry, I was a different key. Head voice first. Start to transition. Full chest. Thank you. And I would ask you to be a bit quieter on that bottom note if you were prior, but we don't have enough time to work on that. So there's the exercise. That can help a lot. If you, again, when you're doing the ring, the resonance, the loft, the float, all those gestures, as you're conducting your choir, if you can hear that they're getting a little too stuck in their chest voice, and they've done this before, you can do a quick bum, bum, bum. Right. Turn down that chest, bring up that head. Oh yeah, okay. That little reminder is super helpful for them. Concerts are really long for kids. They have very short attention spans. Nowadays, it's like 10, 15-second attention span. They need something entirely new. It's hard for me, even with adults, to do a 2-hour PD and keep everybody on topic and keep everybody engaged and with me the whole time. And I move really quick, and I'm very ADHD, and I have a lot of different topics and a lot of silly jokes and a lot of engagement, and it's still hard to keep their attention. Working with the young boys, it's almost impossible. It takes the whole year just to train them to sit still for a 45-minute rehearsal and pay attention. That's an incredibly difficult skill for them. And remember, in a concert, they don't have your instruction on their behaviors. They only have your gesture. So they need these tools to help remind them, because you can't just say, less chest voice, more head. You can't shout that out while you're conducting them. You can think it really hard, and you can make big eyes at them, but that's not helpful. They don't know how to interpret that other than my teacher doesn't like the sound I'm making. Maybe she thinks I'm not loud enough. I'll try singing louder. That's probably what she wants. Not always. Sometimes that is what they want. But being able to make those gestures connect to what they're doing technically helps a lot. Very, very nice. Go ahead and have a seat. I apologize for keeping you standing so long. If you check out the handout I gave you on the actual one that says vocal technique, songs for changing voices, the first page there is a few little bits that most of the material that I put in there is stuff for people who are struggling pitch-wise and also those who are struggling technically. all these exercises, everything I did, including the video of today's workshop, will be available for you online afterwards, so you can review all of that. If you forget anything, pop me an email. I'll answer any questions you have and suggest alternate exercises. But I wanted to take a second for those who are struggling with pitch dramatically, and maybe were struggling with that before their voice changed too, and you're really having trouble bringing them in on their ear training end, at the lowest end. I'm sure at the medium and high end, you guys are fine. You have your methods. You teach them piano, you teach them theory, you maybe do solfege, you maybe do numbers, you maybe teach intervals, whatever your system is. I believe I also included some Kodai hand sign stuff in there too. I did. So I highly recommend movable dose solfege. That helps a lot with the young voices and the ears to get them trained, but whatever system works for you is totally fine. But I've specialized in working with those special cases of kids that just can't sing. I don't like those words. I like can't sing yet. I like won't sing. I like don't sing. I don't like can't sing because I don't know that. I had this one boy in my first middle school job. I was long-term subbing for my former middle school teacher, which was a very trippy experience because all the teachers were the same as when I was in middle school, but I was not the same, and all the rooms looked a lot smaller, and it was very uncomfortable. But I was teaching music for 6 months in this middle school, and I was teaching a piano unit, and I had a boy struggle, trying to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, and he couldn't even do it with just the right hand. He was trying with both hands. He said, "Mr. Keene, I just don't think I can do this." And I said, "Well, why do you think that?" He said, "Well, I'm a football player, and football players learn to move all their fingers at the same time to catch the ball and to throw the. I can't move my fingers like this weird independent." I'm like, "I don't think your football coach would agree that playing football means you're incapable of playing the piano." And so we continued to work together, and he'd just been told that he wasn't musical. He had that experience of, I'm not very good at this, I'm really bad, everyone else is better than me, and every class we have, someone's at the bottom. It's just the way it is. There might be a tie for bottom, it might be close, but someone's there. And it's very, very hard because we want to tell them, no, you're wonderful, you're fantastic, and you're lying to their face, and they know that. They know if they're not good. I had another student who was on the female hockey team at her high school. She performed the national anthem and then went out on the ice, like in her full garb, she was a goalie, and then went out on the ice to play. And she went and cracked on the high note on the Rockets Red Glare, the bombs bursting, all that stuff, like just didn't come out the way she wanted it to. She had a little tuning fork and didn't put herself in the right key. I helped her find a comfortable key. So she was at least, but just the cold air, the dry air, the pressure, the outfit, like there was 100 things. She came up afterwards and she was like, "So what'd you think, Mr. Keene?" Because she asked her parents, her friends, "Oh, no, it was great." And I go, "Well, I mean, you know where it was rough, right?" She's like, yeah, no, but it's cold, dry air, you're in a full hockey uniform, or about to go out for a game, like, considering all of that, pretty good job. And like, 100% those things, she goes, the reason why you're the only one I trust after any performance is you'll tell me when it's bad. Because no one else tells me when it's bad. And we're the ones who can do that. The parents and friends might tell them it's bad, but they don't help them understand and put a narrative to why it was bad and what I can do to get better. They end up stuck in that fixed mindset. If you've read the Carol Dweck mindset stuff, they get stuck in this idea that music is an inherent thing that I have or I don't have. And so when you tell them they're bad, they instantly think, oh, I must just be absolutely terrible and shouldn't sing for the rest of my life. I had a community sing I was doing at a church where I could get the whole group of people, the audience, to sing along with me and everybody do together. I'm happy to do that in any of your schools if you would like, for an assembly or a concert, get the audience singing with your choir. It's very fun. It helps make people see the value of music. Anyway, I did this event and I had a woman come up afterwards to me and mention some of the stuff I've been speaking about, that there's a researcher, Dr. Brene Brown, who researches shame and vulnerability, and she talks about how about 25 to 30% of people have had an experience in childhood that forever changed the way they saw themselves as learners in the arts specifically. Over half of people had that experience in school in general, but over a third had that experience in the arts specifically. One singular moment that forever changed the way they saw themselves in a negative light. And often it is things like, well, you're just not a drawer, you're not an artist, you're not a painter, you can't, come on, just mouth the words in the concert. You just can't carry a tune in a bucket, sweetheart. And sometimes it's a genuine joke. The kid's singing in the shower and the parent just says, "Oh, come on, stop that racket." And they're just kidding. They don't actually want you to stop singing, but you hear that once, and sometimes that once is enough for them to just stop for the rest of their lives. We don't notice that often when we're saying. I don't think teachers are bad teachers if they say that stuff. If you ask a kid to mouth the words in the concert because they sound really rough in class, I don't think that makes you a terrible teacher. I think you're just trying to make those things happen. I would ask you, though, to be very careful with that language, because we don't understand the impact we have on kids when we say that. We are the gods of music to them. For many of those kids, we are the most competent, most skilled, most passionate, most knowledgeable musician they've ever met in their lives. So if they like to sing, and the most skilled, most passionate, most intelligent musician they've ever met says, "You're not very good at singing, please mouth the words," it's very easy to say, "I'm done. I'm not going to do this again." And I had a woman come up to me at the end of this event, and she said, you mentioned that story about people being told they can't sing. This is the first time I've sung in about 80 years. She was around still remember in 5th grade, standing backstage, about to go on stage in my little red dress, and my teacher said, honey, just mouth the words in the concert. Right before she went out. She could still remember the color of the dress 80 years later, and she had not sung from that day until the event where we gave her some permission to do it in a large group. So that is something that's very important. It's very important to offer. It is very sad, but the thing that is hopeful from there, the thing that's wonderful from a moment like that, is that we get a chance to catch those kids in those moments. We get to see them. And every single admin that you've had a disagreement with, every single taxpayer that has voted to defund the arts, every single person at a school board meeting who said, why do we need to have music during the school day? Can't it just be an extracurricular club? Every single one of them had somewhere around 8 years of general music, and we failed them. We didn't show them why music was important in their lives. We focused on the kids who were going to be performers for the rest of their lives, and that's wonderful that 1 to 5% of kids who go on to perform in choirs and bands and orchestras and be church musicians and do whatever, it's wonderful. But they're gonna get private teachers. They're gonna go to college for music. They're gonna come in during recess to practice. I was in recorder club in elementary school. I would come in and play the recorder just for fun because I loved it. It was super fun, and I hate it now, and it's the worst thing that's ever existed. The worst thing ever. But we have a chance to get that next generation. That next generation of admins, parents, people who are out there in the community who won't necessarily be singing along. We have a chance to catch them in our classrooms and show them why music's important. It's not because of Tchaikovsky's birthday. It's not because of the wind family and the string family. It's because of the power music has in our lives. My goal for every one of my students is that they all feel comfortable singing, and not that they put on a great performance, not that they audition for a choir, not that they get to All-State. My goal is that when they're 80, they feel comfortable singing a lullaby to their grandkids. It's a long-term goal. And most, I guarantee you, I mean, if you have a great classroom, maybe it's 80%, but most classrooms, 90 to 95% of those people are not participating in music once they get out of college. Probably 70 to 80% once they get to college. Most of your choir kids are not gonna do choir in college. Most of the ones who do choir in college are not gonna do choir once they're adults. They're gonna get a job as an accountant, as a politician, as a plumber, as a whatever, as a teacher, and it's just not gonna fit in their lives. I'd be willing to bet, by a show of hands, how many here are not currently in an ensemble or any kind of performing context outside of school? Over half. You're music teachers.
Would you like to be?
You're music teachers, and I'm not saying you need to perform, but I'm saying realize you're the passionate ones. That favorite kid you have you think is so amazing, that's you. And many of you are not performing in music. So if the focus is getting them for those performance ensembles, if the focus is building up the music theory knowledge, music history knowledge, if that's the thing that's driving you, it's not relevant to 95% of your students. The thing that's relevant is feeling comfortable with your own voice, so you can sing some Christmas carols with your family. So you can sing along with the national anthem when you go to a Diamondbacks game. So you can sing a lullaby to your kid and teach those lullabies to your children so that when they become parents, they have lullabies to sing to their children. And you can sing those, and you can sing those to your grandchildren. Those moments are so important. And that's why all of this stuff is here. The technical stuff is nice, but if they're scream singing, let it go, at least they're singing. It's better. I remember when Glee came out on TV, and every music teacher said, oh, that's not what a rehearsal looks like. This is not what choirs are. This is, there's so much drama and so much teen angst. This is not what choirs should be. There's choirs on TV. There's choirs on TV. Pentatonics. Pentatonics came from mainstream TV. They were a group before that. They didn't have a massive hit signal. Now there's a Grammy for a cappella arrangement of music, specifically made because of that. Sing off. There's competitions of choirs on TV. It's not classical choir, but it's choir. My friend who went to high school with me, Colin Britt, he directed a group in Connecticut that went on America's Got Talent with a full orchestra and full traditional choir performing Call Me Maybe. In like classical, so call me maybe, hey, I just met you. Yeah, they're fabulous. There is classical singing going on in the mainstream culture now, and Glee was the first thing that really did that. American Idol helped along the way, but that was solo. A lot of those things move towards there, so when you see those things, even when they're frustrating, when you hear the sounds you don't like from your kids, embrace that, accept it. The long term, I encourage you to think about the long term. Think about where your kids are gonna be when they're your age, when they're your parents' ages. Will they be doing the things that you're doing in the classroom every day? I'm not saying get rid of your whole curriculum. A lot of that's wonderful, a lot of it's relevant, but the focus, the core, the gemstone at the center of your curriculum should be something they can use when they're 20, when they're 30, when they're 40, when they're 80. Can they use what you're getting? And if it's just keyboard skills, if it's just theory, if it's just Tchaikovsky's birthday, it's not necessarily gonna be there for them when they're adults. Focus on the voice, make the voice beautiful, help them express themselves through their voices, And please ask me if you ever need any help or if you have any ideas or if you have new things to share. I'm always looking for new material, and I would love to come and observe you in your ensembles. I'd love to come help you and work individually with any one individual kids that have particular challenges. We can catch every kid. Not every kid will learn how to sing, but every kid can learn how to sing. We don't know which ones those are. Some need a lot more help. Some need thousands of hours of individual instruction. We might not be able to provide that for them. They might not be motivated enough to do the work, but we don't know that until we give them the choice. We have to give them the chance. They can sing, they might not. So forgive yourself if they don't, forgive yourself if it doesn't work, but give them the chance. Thank you for your attention today. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.